welcome to the show. For the first time, we're on location, and this is Improve Your Carbon Footprint. Charles, over to you, sir.
Thanks for joining us. Welcome. This is Improve Your Carbon Footprint, where we talk about global warming, we talk about what's happening, the threat from global warming, and what we can all do about it. So today we're sitting in Molly Rose Bakery in South Kensington, London, and we've got a fantastic panel here. We have got special guest Stéphane Savarese, who's the president of Saving Our Planet, who's over here today. Myself, Charles Appleby, I'm the founder of N0CO2, NoCO2.org. We plant trees, plant enough trees, and you go carbon neutral. And Gary. So Gary, do you want to kick us off with the discussion? Thank you.
We cannot look at the news without the environment being on there. It warms me that it's such a topical issue. So we're really talking about what's happening and the fires in Greece and what's happening with the weather. What do you think, Charles?
Well, I mean, my experience of the weather is really this, is that actually I really do like a mild winter because I really hate the snow. But in terms of climate change, I have to say it's a bit of a disaster. And the news this week is just crazy. The temperature in the Antarctic has hit a world record. So it's now 18.3 degrees in Antarctica. So what does this mean? So what it means is that the scientists have been saying for quite a long time that basically the risk is that Antarctica starts to melt. Well, it's already melting. But the potential is there's so much ice in Antarctica that if it does start to melt, then there's actually tens of meters of sea level rise. And once it gets going, then the risk is it's unstoppable.
For me, when I saw that headline, it absolutely shocked me. And I said to my wife, Leah, the Antarctic is warmer than the UK. And she was so blasé. She was like, okay. And I told my children, I don't think people realise the severity of this news. Do you feel that?
I think people haven't realized, although the scientists have been warning us for dozens of years now. It's very slow. The awareness and the understanding are rising, but the overall reaction of the public is fairly slow. And when we ask politicians to act on climate change, they tell us, look, we want to do everything we can, but the people have to ask for it. So it's very important for us to make progress on climate education, on understanding what's happening in our daily life. And we have weather systems which are completely off the charts. We've never seen that. This should strike the mind of the people.
You see, I think the thing is, Gary, is that what's happening is that people are used to watching the news passively. You put the news on and you see what's happening, and what's happening is the news is mainly happening to other people. Other people are having horrendous things happening, other people are having successes. So people watch the news passively, they don't watch it actively thinking, oh my goodness, this is impacting me. Now, maybe things are going to change a little. Maybe the coronavirus, people are going to start thinking, well, this might affect me. But the difference is with global warming is that global warming is definitely going to affect all of us and our families. That's the big difference. And the importance of moving from a passive way of looking at the news to an active way of looking at actually what's going on with climate change, I think is so important for everybody.
So if you're watching this and you've watched, we're on quite possibly episode 9 or 10, and you've been a fan from the beginning, you know that the mantra really is about what you can do, the simple things that you can do to make a difference. So Charles, what do you, taking action, what can we do to make action today?
Well, let's bring Stéphane in to start with this one. So Stéphane, you know, you're an expert in this area, so look, you kick off, you give your thoughts on this one, Stéphane.
Well, you know, Charles, we've been talking about this since COP21, that was 5 years ago. And what have we done since then? We first started to realize that coal power plants are 1/5 of the problem. 20% of the CO2 emissions worldwide come from coal power plants. So we said, okay, we need to shut them down, because if we do that, then you have lower electricity, lower CO2 in your electricity, and when you electrify your transportation or your heating or the industry, then you reduce the CO2 emissions. So it's very important to start with shutting down coal power plants.
Absolutely.
And then the second point is what you can do is use less CO2 intensive transportation, like the metro, the electric trains, biking, and even walking. And we've seen that in Paris. I live in Paris, and there was a big strike in the public transportation. It's amazing how many people went on the streets and using scooters and just walking or biking. I think that the city was much more pleasant than when it's filled with trucks and cars.
I read the other day that the faster, the more we walk, the longer we live.
It's better for
There's
your
a
health.
statistic that says that the more you walk, the faster you walk, the more your heart works. So
But that's the second thing I've discovered this year, is that whenever we do something for the climate, we do something for health and biodiversity. You've seen the Australian bushfires. It's a nightmare. 1 billion animals dead. How can we live with that? I mean, it's really, for me, it's really the sign that we need to act on climate change. So when we reduce our CO2 emissions, we reduce the risk of such fires occurring. So we save lives, actually, with at least animal lives and even sometimes human lives.
oh, it's an ecosystem. We're all part of this ecosystem. So we all know that if bees disappear, life disappears. We know if flies disappear, it's just everything is interconnected. Charles, are there other easy steps that we can do?
Absolutely. I mean, today we're sitting here at Molly Rose Bakery in South Kensington, London, and you know, we're just a very short walk from the tube station, and millions of people, it seems like millions of people come through South Kensington tube station, and we've got an amazing system here of public transport. So in addition to that, we've got a lot of buses around here, we've got delivery vehicles. So the opportunity is for the authorities to start to move the buses and the delivery vehicles to electric, to make this street along here so much more pleasant. But I mean, what everybody's now saying is that there's so many things that individuals can do. So as Stefan has said, people can look at cutting their own CO2 emissions. And you just take a look at the fossil fuels that we're using, petrol for the car. Air travel is based on kerosene, fossil fuels. Look at the fossil fuels you're using, and just think about these and what we can do differently. But in the UK, there's a really, really big and easy one that anyone can do, which is to switch your electricity.
Yep.
So in the market, there are some suppliers who supply 100% clean or green electricity. And by switching to those, basically you're saving the whole household, you're saving around about, on average, a ton of CO2 per household per year. So once you've switched, then that's a ton every year that you're saving. It's really, really easy.
What about tree planting, Charles?
Tree planting. Well, tree planting is amazing. I mean, we're talking just now about cutting your CO2 emissions. But what you're doing with tree planting is it's a natural process. It's a natural way that the nature removes CO2 from the air. So by planting more trees, then we can remove our CO2 emissions. So it takes a lot of trees, but on the other hand, the cost of planting trees is not expensive. So you know, you can plant a lot of trees and you can actually go carbon neutral. And that's the website for that is www.n0co2.org. Take a look, it's got all the information.
And it's so affordable. I sleep easy at night. You could do a £5 direct debit or a £10 direct debit, and you know that your family and your car and all the things that you're doing to add carbon to the environment, you're actually neutralizing that.
Yeah, so I mean, it's critically important that we all reduce our CO2 emissions. But once you've done what you can, it's down to people. It's really important that people choose what's suitable for their life. You choose what's suitable for your life. But once you've cut what you can, then it's a very easy way to remove your CO2 emissions by planting lots of trees.
Well, I'm really pleased that we're here, and even this place is a case study of the kind of things that a cafe, a bakery can do. These are our friends. We've already discussed with them about planting trees and offsetting the carbon there. Your suggestion was that when someone uses their own cup, that they get a discount. Yeah, you came up with so many great ideas.
No, I mean, for a very simple way of doing this is just to basically invite people. If you've got an ordinary cafe, just to invite people to make a donation if they use a takeaway cup. So it's now easy to get reusable cups. Get your own cup, take it with you. But if you haven't got one or you've forgotten it, then just for a cafe to invite you to make a small donation, 10 pence, 20 pence or whatever, just as a reminder to you, well look, I'll bring my reusable cup next time. And it's so much easier and it's so much better than the planet. I mean, the problem with these paper cups is that they're not just paper, as I understand it. The problem is they've got a liner in there, and it's still quite difficult, and not a lot of the paper cups that are used are actually being recycled. That's the problem.
So Paris, tell us about Paris, because in London, in the centre of London, you can come here. If you drive a diesel or a petrol car, you have to pay a congestion charge. If you have an electric car, you don't have to pay a charge. Is that the same in Paris?
Yeah, I guess in France, but we're reaching the limit of that. It's a bit easier to impose things rather than counting on voluntary action. So what's going to happen is that Paris is going to phase out the gasoline and diesel engines by 2030, and gasoline engines by 2025.
Amazing.
All over France, it's 2040. That's already been voted. That's a bit too far because, you know, we only have 10 years to save the climate. The carbon budget at the rate that we're emitting greenhouse gas emissions will be exhausted in 10 years. It means that in 10 years, if we haven't divided by 2 our CO2 emissions, what Charles was talking about, which is accelerated melting of both polar ice caps, will become catastrophic, which means that sea level rise will increase. So we really need to avoid that. We are the first generation which is affected by this phenomenon, and we are the last one that can do something about it. It's a unique chance in the whole history of mankind that we have the knowledge and the power to change our future. Why not we do it? Not just for ourselves, but for the next generations, for billions of animals, to save ecosystems. We want to save the climate and biodiversity.
Yeah, that's an amazing way of putting it, Stefan. I mean, I really like that. I mean, for me, you know, we're always talking about how we're the most
Despite that, and despite all the computers and the technology and everybody using their smartphones, despite that, we've got a situation where implicitly we are we're in the process of allowing climate change to wreck the planet. As Stefan says, it's so important we actually do something about that. But just let's put this into context, Stefan. The UK and France have announced the end of sales of petrol and diesel cars by 2040, which is a long way ahead. What you're just saying then is that in Paris specifically, you're not going to be able to buy a petrol diesel car after...
They won't be allowed to run.
To drive them.
Yeah, it will have to be
drive
completely electric drive by 2030.
2030. Okay, so Gary, you live in a really nice green part of London. You live near a station, and you've got a car. So how would you feel about being in this regime where
I have no
you were
problem
not
at all with
allowed
that.
to drive you have to get an electric car by 2025?
You're speaking to the wrong person, because I really do care about how the environment, how we treat the environment. So for me, that's a really good, that's good news. You know, I cycle. If I can possibly do it, I'll cycle wherever I can. Charles has been such an influence on me. When I took on this project of making the show, I really wasn't as educated, and maybe I was a little bit cynical. But when you say 10 years to me, and then we've got 10 years left, it really worries me as a father. And can we put some meat on the bone of that? How have you got that number of 10 years?
don't you want to do something about it?
100%.
Okay, IPCC in the report, in the 2018 report, updated what we call the carbon budget. The carbon budget is the remaining greenhouse gas emissions to avoid global warming larger than 2 degrees. And that budget is actually 420 billion tons of CO2. But we are emitting 42 billion tons per year. So that's 10 years left at constant emissions. But if we divide our emissions by 2 before 2030, then we buy more time because we won't have exhausted those 420 gigatons.
There's science behind what you're saying. Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's no denying.
There is a 300-page report and thousands of pages of scientific publications. The scientists are losing their voice shouting now because before 2015 they were just talking to one another. Maybe that's why for so many years nobody was listening to them. But now, or for the past 2 years, scientists have been shouting that politicians, the public, NGOs, corporations have to react now, and it has to start in 2020, not next year, this year. And this is why you're going to have COP26 in Glasgow. It's a unique chance to get this fast decarbonation movement started, but really started in fact, not just talk.
So Gary, I think we might have a question here.
Yeah, we've got a question from the audience.
Yeah, I have a question for Charles. So I've been giving trees for years. My family, my clients are used to getting trees for presents, virtual trees that they can donate to organisations that plant trees plant online. But one thing I've noticed that I'm finding quite worrying, and I noticed it even more since some of the major airlines have started communicating about the fact that they're going to allegedly offset all flights with planting trees, is that people seem to understand that the problem is solved because all we have to do is plant trees, and you plant enough trees you become carbon neutral. So the problem I see is, first of all, the trees we're funding today will not actually be absorbing carbon for 20 years, and also is that they cannot possibly compensate the amount that's already in the atmosphere and what we're continuing to. So how to get the message across that do plant trees, but it's definitely not enough, and it's not a reason for cutting down on your plane flights, for instance. How to get that message
I'm going to
across?
repeat that question in case you didn't hear.
Okay, Gary.
So,
thank you.
In a succinct way, with the airlines, they're giving us a full sense. Are they giving us a full sense of security that by carbon offsetting, planting trees, is that enough? And do we just become relaxed and think, oh, we're going to plant some trees? Will the trees be active enough to neutralize the carbon now that we're worried about for 20 years? Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Well, this is a really good question.
Great question.
I'm happy to share with people that I've actually reduced my CO2 emissions, and my wife, who's over there, I've reduced our CO2 emissions personally by 100%. Okay. So I presented at a meeting a while ago in November. I presented to an audience of people involved with climate change, and I asked the question, look, how many people here have reduced their CO2 emissions by 10%? Now, I thought, well, this is going to be, with this audience, going to be an easy question. A lot of people have done 50%. But only of the audience, only 10% had actually felt they reduced their CO2 emissions by even as little as 10%. So what I would say to this question, I would say it's critically important for people to do something. Choose what you want to do. If you don't want to do some of this stuff and you feel it's not really relevant to you because of where you live in your life, then do something else. But do something. Now with the airlines, I don't think the airlines have been. Worry I've got is that the airlines are they're not being transparent. Not really being transparent. They're not being transparent at all about where the money's going, what they're spending money on. If you look at the www.n0co2.org website, and the FAQ, it explains the numbers, explains about the trees, explains about the money, explains everything. It's to my mind, a good level of detail. But what's so important is that people make a start and do something. You're absolutely right in terms of the question that it's not enough just to plant trees. To plant trees is important. It's also important, really, really important for people to cut their CO2 emissions. And some of the things Stefan has been talking about are things that really can be done by local government and central government. So it's a combination of all of these things. But it's so important at this stage to get started and get people with the idea that they're doing
Those
something
sentiments are great.
and
What
can do
I
something.
understood from the question as well, if we plant a tree today, how effective is it by neutralizing the
Okay,
carbon
so
in
we're
here?
planting trees in the Far East. I mean, it's good to plant trees in the UK, and the UK government has made a decision to plant a lot of trees. Now, they're actually quite expensive in the UK, but okay, if people want to plant trees in the UK, that's good. But the fact is that trees in the tropics grow 3 times faster, so the amount of CO2 they absorb is 3 times more, and trees are a lot more cost effective. For your £1, if you're £1 with ourselves planting mangroves in the Far East in Madagascar, then you get 10 trees. You get 10 trees for £1. In the UK, you probably get less than 1 tree for £1. So this is a big factor. And the reality is, after only a few years, those trees in the Far East, only 3 or 4 years, those trees can be 5, 10, 15, 20 feet high. So they really do grow fast. So on average, trees in the Far East will absorb CO2 emissions 3 times faster. And the other point about this question is, people said, well, when's the best time to plant a tree? The best time to plant a tree is actually 20 years ago, but the second best time to plant a tree is now, because now is the future.
Did we cover all the questions? Did we cover them? So unfortunately, I'm so sad that when you're in the flow, that the time just flies. Well, I've already been broadcasting for 25 minutes, and I really would like to say about Greta and Extinction Rebellion. What's going to happen for 220 to both of you? Do you think the movement will be stronger? You have more help from?
Well, I hope the movement doesn't get stronger, because it might become violent, and it should remain non-violent. We've seen some beginning of violence in Paris. I don't know, maybe in London, Extinction Rebellion is more civilized. But really, we've reached that limit where the movement should not become stronger. So what we want to do is to address the demands of Extinction Rebellion and Youth for Climate and Fridays for Future, which is they want to know what the solutions are. And that's named climate education. What is missing now is climate education in high school. Even at the university in France, only 11% of the university level students get a climate education. This is unbelievable. So, of course, if there is ignorance, there will be anger and there will be violence. We know that. How many times has this happened in history? Right? So, if you know your history, you know what has to be done. You need to teach people what the problem exactly is, what the solutions or the potential solutions are, what works, what might work, and what might not work. And then you need to tell them, okay, you can make an educated choice about your own action against climate change, and also collective action about climate change, because we need both. The solution is 50% individual and 50% collective, and we have all the technologies. We can deliver a message of hope. We have the solutions, we have the technologies. Now people need to understand them, because if there is no consensus, we won't be effective.
You're absolutely right about it.
And it has to happen this year, not next year.
If we were sitting in this cafe in the 1970s, it would be filled with smoke. People would be smoking, having a cigar and having a cigarette. Now that's unacceptable. I think in 10 years' time it will be unacceptable to use fossil fuels, I hope. Education will be compulsory of young people, that they will have to understand. That's my hope.
Yeah, that's a great point, Gary. It's a really great point. I think everyone will have seen how in 2019 was really about, it was Greta and the way that Greta took on the world leaders, and it was also about the Extinction Rebellion, getting out on the streets and making a difference. Now, where we are now, What I see is that in the UK's got this amazing opportunity with COP26 of all the world leaders coming to Glasgow in November. And basically, the UK has really got to try and make a huge effort to bring countries on board and to demonstrate that the UK itself is a case study for what can be achieved. So this year should be all about COP26. If this is not going well, then absolutely, I'm sure Extinction Rebellion will be back on the streets protesting. There will be no choice. But the year should be about tackling the CO2 reductions that Stefan mentioned, planning for COP26, making a real difference, and engaging with everybody. That's what it should be about.
At the end of the day, this is a human story. This is about humanity. So I just want to really finish the show by asking, where's your passion? How did you manage to get to be so influential in the world of reducing carbon and saving our planet?
Well, it's very simple. In 2015, I understood that climate change would become catastrophic.
What was your part? What did you do before that?
I was an engineer in the industry,
okay,
aerospace engineer, and then a simulation, high-performance computing engineer, and that led me to understanding that climate change would become catastrophic if we don't change, if we don't exit the business as usual scenario. And so I left my job and went 100% on climate change, because we really need to focus on this problem. It's very important that we spend a lot of time and resources on solving the problem. That's the first thing. The second thing, that there have been thousands of people who have done exactly what I did, which is really focusing on the problem. So it is not true that we don't have the solutions. We have some solutions, but we don't have a plan, because there is a lack of consensus, a lack of agreement in communities, and Charles has been working with communities at the national level, at the international level. We have the Paris Agreement, which is the general framework, but now countries need to respect it, and communities need to understand what it means for them. That's the same thing, and education is part of it. And the third thing is that organizations like the Citizen Climate Lobby, which is an international organization which is very active in North America and Europe, have designed something that we call the climate income, which is a socially fair form of carbon tax, because nobody wants a new tax, but if you make it the right way with 2 or 3 conditions, then it becomes fair and possible to have a rapidly rising price of CO2 and greenhouse gases that will actually boost the carbonation, which is removing the high CO2 intensive solutions and replacing them with low carbon solutions.
You know what I think? I think we're very lucky to have you. I think we are really, really fortunate. This show, there's no charge for this show. All we ask you to do is share, like, comment, tell a friend, make a small change in your habit to make a difference. Charles, what's your passion? You're the one, this was your idea. Well, tell us how we can make a change.
You've made this happen, but everything changed when I met Stefan in 2016, okay? So when I met Stefan, I came to the view that really we were only going to make a difference with climate change if we got involved people and families. So the politicians and the world leaders, you know, they're influenced so much by people and families as voters. I felt that that's critical, and I felt that something that's incredibly practical is to plant trees. I mean, I know, as the question said earlier, it's not the only solution, but it really does help. If people plant a lot of trees, there's a campaign kicked off at the World Economic Forum Davos to plant 1 trillion trees, and amazingly, Donald Trump in his State of the Union speech only a week or 2 ago supported the 1 trillion trees. So guys, let's get a load of trees planted. It costs money, so that's why donations are needed. But for me, as I said earlier, we've got the tree planting, we've got, it's just so important for people to choose and get involved. people can make all the difference with this. So that the other project to take a look at, which does not involve donation, it's www.stopglobalwarming.today. It's really easy to get involved. You choose what you want to do, and all this makes a difference. I mean, we here we're sharing, we're facilitating, but it's the huge audience out there. If you share, you make a difference, then we can really together we can make a huge difference.
I want to thank you both for your time and sharing your knowledge. You have a final word, just something to tell the audience. Your final words, sir.
Well, plant trees and talk about it. Talk to your neighbors and your friends, your elected officials, so that they understand that this is important and this is just the beginning. We have a lot more things to do together.
Great. Plant trees, talk about it. Join a local organization. Get out, meet some people, join a local organization, get involved, and share about what you're doing, share about what's going on. That's it, folks. Thank you.
I hope you've enjoyed this show. Good night.
Bye.
Thank you.